All right. So thank you for this chance to present this paper. I don't know if is the mic good?
Yeah,
Okay.
we can give you a handheld too if you'd prefer.
Okay. No.
You can take that one if you'd like.
Okay. So yeah, this paper is called Expected Discrimination in Job Search. It's joint work with Yeda and Fernando, who are my cohort mates at UBC. And the motivation for this paper is that, okay, we know that employers discriminate against job seekers of some groups or in some contexts. But in this paper, we want to know that that's not the end of the story. If we want to know what are the ultimate impacts of discrimination in the labor market, or even what to do about it, there are other things that determine the labor market equilibrium. For instance, how job seekers react to discrimination. So that there could be a big role for those expected discrimination beliefs, right? It's beliefs of how a firm will treat you differently because of some characteristic that you bear. For instance, we think that this might make things worse, might amplify the effects of employer discrimination if maybe people overestimate how much discrimination there is, or if they overestimate how much discrimination there is and become discouraged, give up applying for jobs, or they still apply, but then when they go for a job interview later, they think they might be treated unfairly, so they become nervous, cannot perform as well, creating some of the gaps that we observe, right? So in this paper, we designed a set of field experiments to try to understand how those expectations about discrimination affect people's job search, okay? And the context for it is that of favelas in Rio. So these are neighborhoods in the middle of the city. They are urban slums. They are typically ruled by organized crime. You see like 15-year-olds with AK-47s on the streets. Police goes in and does random raids whenever they want. But at the same time, in these neighborhoods, there's a lot of people who might be looking for their first jobs or a more stable job. Then they would be looking for formal jobs, mostly outside favelas, maybe in the city center, which is like over there, so maybe like 40 minutes away from those favelas that we were working in. And then when they apply for those jobs outside favelas, people expect discrimination based on their addresses, right? It's a fairly salient dimension for them. For instance, in Brazil, there's even a word to describe people from favela that's very derogatory. So it is something that people think about. And in our survey, we have a field survey to start with. We just asked directly, why do you think that employers discriminate against people from favelas? And on the bottom here is what comes up. People have fairly sophisticated second-order beliefs. They mention that firms might anticipate that people from favela will miss days of work because of police raids. Also, they know that in favelas, there's a higher share of the non-white population, and there's racism, so they might discriminate because of that. There are cultural differences or just dislike of favela residents. So we're thinking about it is indeed a bundle of reasons, and people understand it as a bundle, right? And to be more concrete, like we designed a set of field experiments to try to answer what is the effect of these beliefs about expected discrimination on people's decisions to apply for real jobs and interview performance, right? We have one of those 4 experiments just measuring how much discrimination there is in our setting, like anti-favela discrimination. But the other 3, which are sort of the main dish of the paper, is this set of experiments with job seekers from favelas, in which basically we designed this pipeline, and we put experiments along the pipeline. It starts with a door-to-door survey in favelas with job seekers. Then people have a chance to apply for this real full-time sales jobs that we have with our partner in Rio. And also they might go for a job interview. This job application bit after the survey is all done through an HR firm that we set up just for this experiment. So people are kind of dealing with a realistic HR firm that maybe could discriminate against them, but will hold most of the things fixed on the employer side. And then, yeah, basically our main strategy to randomize expected discrimination is reducing expected address visibility. So is it randomizing whether you might expect the HR firm or the interviewer to know your address. So you might think of that as sort of a blinding policy, evaluating a blinding policy, but from the point of view of the job seeker, right? And we also have a third experiment that maybe I'll have time to talk about, or maybe not. Let's see. So going into our results now. So first, our descriptive result here just that job seekers from favelas seem to really overestimate how much discrimination there is against against like favela resumes. So the way that we measure expected discrimination, like our main measurement of expected discrimination, is asking people to predict the results of an audit study that we did at the same time as the survey. So we tell them like we're sending this fictitious resumes to sales jobs in Rio. We're randomizing the address that goes into the resume, can either be from the favela or just outside the favela. Can you try to guess the callback rate for each resume? We'll pay you based on accuracy, right? And then the median job seeker expects quite a bit of discrimination. They expect that having a favela address in your resume will cut down callback rates by half. But actually, we find very similar callback rates for both neighborhoods. I think there are reasons why we might find that. We don't think that that implies that there is no discrimination at all. But what's the main point here of this exercise is like people really seem to be overly pessimistic against this fairly objective benchmark that they would be in a position to guess, right? And this kind of hints that maybe we really have a problem here. And then going into the experiments now, we have this kind of main experiment on application decisions. So what we do there is that a few days after people answer the survey, they got this invite to apply for those jobs from the HR firm. Then the invite might either say that address is also or not necessary for applying for those jobs. So making address not necessary is kind of the main treatment here, deviating from the status quo of always asking for an address. But then we do not find effects on average of dropping address, right? People apply about 40% of the time. They show up for the interview about 20% of the time out of everybody who we invited. But there is one subpopulation for who it does make a difference, like dropping address basically encourages the white job seekers to apply more often and by a good amount. And the way that we think about that is that for a white person, it's easier to pass as a non-favela resident if you think that your address is hidden. For a non-white person, there is a correlation between race and address, and you might also think that firms will stereotype, right? And also for the non-white job seekers, they might be expecting discrimination either way because of their race. So for most people here, a treatment that will be kind of intuitive of blinding or hiding address doesn't really make a difference. Like there's only 25% or so of white people in the sample. Okay? And now shifting to the interview where we find kind of more effects of expected discrimination. So the way that experiment here works is that after people apply, they're invited for this interview in downtown Rio. When they get there, a receptionist greets them. She asks them to confirm their name, their date of birth, and address, regardless of what happened to them earlier. And then she says, "Oh, your interviewer is ready to see you and here because we really care about being objective on how we select candidates. She will only know your name, or she will only know your name and address, right?" So this and address is the only thing that is the only randomization here. And what's important is that during the interview, the interviewer only knows name. So they are not in a position to discriminate against anybody. We only told interviewers about the address and other stuff after we debriefed them at the end of the experiment. So anything that's happening here must come first through the candidate, what they're thinking or doing, right? And then we collect outcomes right after the interview. The interviewer fills in the 0 to 10 ratings, and the candidate also fills a self-assessment form in the same dimensions at the reception after the interview. And here's what we find. So people, when they think that the interviewer only knows their name, do better by about 0.17 standard deviations, which is fairly big effect. They think that they do better. And then what gives us more confidence to think that it's really expected discrimination that's leading to this result is that if we look at people who expect high discrimination from the beginning at our baseline survey in the measure that I introduced before, then they do better both on their own opinion and in their interviewer's opinion. So on the flip side, that means that they do worse when they think that the interviewer knows their address, right? So there is kind of all the ingredients here for a kind of self-reinforcing loop of beliefs leading to worse performance and some differences that we might observe in the labor market. So yeah, I'll wrap up here. I think I'm at time, but just a quick summary. So job seekers think you overestimate how much discrimination there is in this audit study. Blinding at the moment of the application only helps white job seekers, and expected discrimination at the interview seems to be a bigger issue. We tried a different policy, like telling people what we found in the audit study to see if that will help. The answer is that it's also complicated. It's not a panacea. I can talk more about that in the Q&A.
Super interesting. Nina Buchan, and I'm a grad student at Stanford. I was wondering whether this was the final result, the self-fulfilling prophecy may not just be kind of motivated reasoning. As in, if I think it's easier for me to think that I'm going to be discriminated against than to think that I have a low chance because I'm low ability.
Right. So our design cannot completely rule that out. Like what we think is going on is some interaction between being more stressed and kind of choking under pressure when you think that the interviewer knows your address. I didn't show you there, but we added a discussion on the paper. Like it really seems like people feel much more stressed when they, especially the people who expect higher discrimination to begin with, they feel much more stressed when they know that the interviewer when they think that the interviewer might know their address. And then this seems to reflect badly evenly on the interviewer, on the interviewer's opinion. And yeah, like you wouldn't necessarily need the extra stress in that interpretation, but it's possible, yeah.
Go back to your original measure, very interesting study on the like them overestimating, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering whether it is just that there are smaller number of people who apply from the favela, right, as opposed to from the non-favela locations in general for these types of jobs that you expose them to, and so they are not, they are not computing for you the success rate conditional on applying, right? Because they don't really observe that. But if fewer people are applying from within the favelas to begin with, if I were to factor that into account, what would that do to the overestimation rate that you're coming? Do you see what I'm asking?
I think so. I think there definitely have, like nobody has really a lot of experience applying to a large number of jobs outside of favela and randomizing their addresses, or even like trying to either say that you're from the favela or not. So it is something that's hard to guess, I guess, for many people. Like we do, like people in our sample are all job seekers, and many of them have already worked before and worked outside favelas. So if I remember right, that doesn't help them guess better. But I should double check that. So yeah, and we try to really describe like, okay, we're doing this. This is the resume that we're sending to this jobs. This is what it looks like. So we try to give them the best shot possible at understanding the experiment and guessing it. But it is hard to guess, I guess.
Maybe just one more quick one, and then we'll keep it going.
I guess I just like
Can you introduce yourself first, please? Sorry.
John Rozier. Like I guess my prior before this would have been that based on the Ban the Box studies that it's always just bad to blind. And I guess what I found interesting on this was it's getting at this labor supply side instead of the demand side, where it might be optimal for me to reduce my like search or interview effort if I expect to be discriminated against. And I guess it seems like that maybe affects how we think about these policies, or at least says that we need. Is that right?
Yes, I think that was something that was on our minds. Like we are looking at the other side of the equation here, and I guess the Benebox studies kind of tell us that they're kind of they could be a bad idea. They can generate like unintended consequences, like other kinds of discrimination. And here in our study, that's in the case that we do the thing that's most similar to BandaBox at the moment of the application, it also doesn't go super well because it doesn't work for most people. So I guess like here we say, yeah, we should be even more cautious about things like that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
David.